Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. 4 years after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, farmers there continue to feed the nation amid power cuts, buried mines and bombardment.
There's unexploded missiles in the fields, there's mines in the fields, there is Iranian-Russian drones flying over their fields. They shot them out of the air, they fall into the fields. But that's closer to the front line. And those farmers who still farm there, they are really brave.
We'll have more on that a little later. First today, several farmers in the Midlands have been giving up pieces of their land to create wetland habitats for wintering birds. Work is being carried out to make scrapes and channels on fields so they'll attract species like the snipe and lapwing. But how do the farmers feel about taking pockets of land out of production? Bob Hockenhull has been finding out more.
Brian Rampton is putting the finishing touches to a wetland he's created on a farm on the Warwickshire-Northamptonshire border. It's one of a number of sites the former farmer and West Midlands bird ringing group member has been working on in the area.
With the farmers' permission, we've been creating some wetland areas, primarily scrapes, some small low trenches that are suitable for jack snipe. We're hoping to pick up some wader type birds, snipe, oyster catcher, lapwing, etc. Basically using a digger to excavate down to the clay layer, and then basically it's just a case of waiting for them to fill up and see what sort of success we have from them. There's plenty of farmers out there that are keen and willing to let us do this sort of work as well. So we want to run with that and help them as much as we can.
The call of the snipe. Brian hopes it'll become a familiar cry this winter. But isn't his new wetland replacing valuable farmland that could be used for food production?
This particular area isn't particularly suited for cropping in terms of we're at the bottom of a hill, so it lays predominantly wet over the winter months. And it's also, because of its shape, quite awkward to work. So by taking this out of production, we've been able to enhance the wildlife benefits on here, but it still allows the farmer to have the bulk of the field to crop as well.
The farmer in this case is Rebecca Sunang Jory.
Anything that brings in water is obviously of benefit to any bird life, animal life, but also pollinators. Obviously, we are an arable farm growing crops, and pollinators are of huge importance for pollinating our crops. So I see it as something hugely beneficial.
Have you benefited financially at all by introducing these wetlands?
It's more of the sort of secondary effect, really. So we've had help with the grant available to make the wetlands. But obviously, where there's water, there's life. When the water's there, then the insects are there, then the animals are there, wading birds are there, and that is enhancing all the time the natural aspect of the farm. It's helping with species. It's giving a proper dimension to the sort of mono dimension of just a cereal crop.
That report from Bob Hockenhull. It's 4 years today since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's obviously been devastating for the population, and while frontline fighters and high-pressure politics make the headlines, it's the country's farmers who have the massive responsibility of keeping the people of Ukraine fed. The war has led to soaring prices of fuel and fertiliser, but more than that, labour shortages and continual power cuts have put massive pressure on what was an efficient and profitable industry. Kees Huizinga is a Dutch farmer who moved to Ukraine to run a large mixed farm just before the invasion took place. He estimates that 20% of farmland has been lost to the war.
For the farming itself, it's not so bad. It's worse for the people, especially for the people in the cities. For farming, well, we've been preparing already for this for like 4 years since the war started. We bought generators. Some of us have batteries. We are heating on wood, drying maize on with wood chips, for example. We built heat exchangers. We bought a special oven, solar panels on the roof. So, we can produce our own heat and our own electricity. And we have to, because otherwise we can't milk the cows or we can't feed the pigs or we can't prepare the machinery, we can't weld. So yeah, we had to. We didn't have a choice. Otherwise, everything would have stopped already a long time ago.
You're a relatively big farm. What about labour? Because obviously many of the men have gone, they're fighting. Who's working on the farm and how many people have you got now?
So that we had like 40 people in the army. There's still a little bit more than 30. So some guys came back from the army and a few guys died as well on the front lines. And we can kind of reserve 50% of our workforce so they can't take them to the army. So of course the choice is on us whom we reserve and whom we kind of don't reserve. Yeah, and the guys who are not reserved, they can be picked up every day for the army. But luckily, they don't pick up so many guys from us.
And do you see any evidence of fighting? Do you see drone activity? What are you seeing around you?
Yeah, we are in the middle of nowhere and not really in a strategic area. So the cruise missiles and the drones, every now and then they fly over our farm. It's kind of a scary sound, of course, but you kind of get used to it, and it's nothing compared to the places where these things are aimed at and where they explode. My agronomist, he is from Kherson, from the occupied area, so he escaped. We took him to work, and he has an apartment in Kiev. And last Sunday morning at 5:30, like 80 meters from his house, a rocket exploded. 2 other houses were completely burned down. And in his house and all the neighbors, all the windows were blown out of the building. His wife lives there, and he was there as well. It was over the weekend, so they were there together.
Is Ukraine managing to feed its people?
That's absolutely no problem. Ukraine exports like 80% of what it produces, and the rest is for domestic consumption, and domestic consumption is also to feed cattle or chicken, cows, pigs, or to make sunflower oil, for example. But I mean, the biggest chunk is for export. So Ukrainian farmers, they know how to grow crops, so we will always have enough for own consumption. But yeah, if you take out like 50, 60, 70 million tons of commodities from the world market, that has a huge effect on world market price, of course.
Indeed, it does. And actually, everything that happens to you happens to the rest of the world, doesn't it?
Sure. And then it's the poor countries, like a lot of African countries, for example, where people won't have enough money to buy these commodities. So yeah, that will be. We had this situation in the first half year when the war started. The most vulnerable place we have is our export ports on the Black Sea near Odessa. And if somehow the Russians manage to block these or to destroy these, then we have a real problem. And of course, the farms close to the front line, it's very hard to farm there. There's unexploded missiles in the fields, there's mines in the fields, there is Iranian, Russian drones flying over their fields. They shot them out of the air, they fall into the fields. That's closer to the front line. And those farmers who still farm there, they are really brave. They risk. I know guys who were cultivating, and with a cultivator they hit a mine. The mine exploded. The whole cultivator was gone. Tractors' windows were blown out, but the guy survived, and he had this already 2 times. So now he's afraid to go back into the fields. They are really brave. Keep things going. And then if you come even closer to the front line, of course, or the front line itself, nothing's grown there. So those fields are overgrown with weeds. So they can't do anything there.
Farmer Kees Huizinga speaking to us from Ukraine. Well, BBC correspondent James Waterhouse was based in Ukraine for the last several years. I asked him what impact he'd seen on farmland in Ukraine during his time there.
As is often said, it's the breadbasket of Europe. And whenever I drive around Ukraine and you see the never-ending fields of sunflowers or crops, I think 2 things. I think you can see why Russia wanted to take it, but also you can't believe that Russia thought they could take it with 150,000 men. It is vast. It is one giant valley with the lengthy Dnipro River separating its east and west. Many listeners would have seen the map of occupied territory. Russia for the last few years has occupied a fifth of Ukraine. But of course, the impact of its invasion goes far beyond that. So you have the lost land, but also you have a quarter of Ukraine overall that is littered with landmines and ordnance. It's the most mined country in the world now. And I've been told estimates from when I was there that it'll take upwards of a century to be made completely safe. Ukraine's ability to export has been hampered by Russian naval blockades in the past, but also Russia's, the fact that it's almost impossible to fly commercially. So rail routes are now relied upon, where you can export far less. So when you take that against the backdrop of an economy that is battered, that needs propping up by its Western allies, Ukraine's main industry really has. It's hard to think of another sector that has felt so much of an impact from this war.
What about the internal food market? We heard from Kees that actually people are getting fed. There's no shortage of food as such, but I suspect prices must be pretty high.
To be honest, no. I say this almost ashamedly. I think it's, I think in the first month of the invasion, when you had the Russians enclosing on Kyiv and advancing in three directions across Ukraine more broadly, there was a period of a month where you felt the squeeze on supply chains. There was panic buying and there were shops emptying. And that combined with a whole lot of adrenaline and stress meant I lost quite a bit of weight. I was quite chuffed. But that is I'm more than happy to say that you won't eat in a better country. You won't have a better culinary experience than in Ukraine. They are big on their pickled vegetables, their soups, their array of meats. There's Georgian cuisine. There's Crimean Tatar restaurants that are just delicious. And in the main, costs and supply chains have been unaffected, in my experience, apart from when you're in, say, the eastern Donbass region, where you're very much in a militarised zone. The transportation of goods is far more risky. But it is something that clearly Ukraine and its allies have been able to sustain. And of course, we're not just talking about food, but military aid as well. So that is something that has endured.
Do the farmers get subsidies? Do they get help? And where does that money come from?
So the European Union did relax tariffs to give Ukraine a leg up. And that was not without tension. We saw protests from Polish farmers who blockaded the border between Ukraine and Poland, which is a major supply route. I can't stress enough for military and humanitarian aid. But they argued that it would drive down prices and they would bear the brunt. And that's almost been eclipsed by the European Commission making this separate Mercosur deal with Latin American countries, where there is going to be tariff-free trading. The same concerns are there, but the spotlight seems to be off Ukraine for now. So Ukraine is getting some help, and its major customers, certainly in grain and maize, like China, like some African countries, they are now receiving it, because it was once feared in 2022 that a major food crisis would evolve. Unfortunately, that hasn't transpired.
BBC correspondent James Waterhouse. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Sally Challoner. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.